Hello and welcome to Net Zero Heroes, Small Business, Big Impact. My name's Gabriella Griffith from Lemon Quarters and I'm hosting today's session on behalf of the British Business Bank. As you know, this session is about the role of small business in tackling climate change. We've got some brilliant business owners here to talk about their own journeys and challenges and the opportunities posed by net zero, and we'll meet them in a moment. I'd like to quickly point out that we'll have some quiz questions on the screen, which you can choose to answer or not. It's kind of up to you. But we'll start with a quick look at some of the stats from the British Business Bank's report, Smaller Business and the Transition to Net Zero. The report found that while smaller businesses often have a relatively low emission at an individual level, collectively they account for around half, that's 43 to 53%, of UK business greenhouse gas emissions, which seems huge. However, overall, it's estimated that 3 in 4 businesses, that's 76%, are yet to implement comprehensive decarbonisation strategies. And while nearly 60% of firms report reasonable awareness of key net zero concepts, around half are not ready to prioritise decarbonisation. I think there's some really interesting facts there, and these are going to be framing our conversation today. And perhaps now is a good point to bring in some of our panelists. I'll be asking them to introduce themselves and the role they play in the drive to sustainability. So Shanika, I'm going to start with you as a representative from the British Business Bank. Can you give us a quick reflection on some of those stats that you guys have come up with, and also tell us a little bit about your role and the sustainability drive at British Business Bank?
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. So my name's Shanika Amrasekaran. I'm the Chief Impact Officer at the British Business Bank. And for those of you who aren't familiar with who we are Government's Economic Development Bank, who are dedicated to making finance markets work better for smaller businesses. And we're really conscious of what we discovered in the research that you highlighted there around smaller businesses having such an important role to play in supporting the transition to net zero, and in recognition of the role that smaller businesses play in meeting net zero. We've recently explicitly added net zero to our mission. So our new mission is to drive sustainable growth and prosperity across the UK, and to enable the transition to a net zero economy by improving access to finance for smaller business. So as you can imagine, the sustainability agenda and the conversation we're having around what do smaller businesses need to do, where is the opportunity, what are the barriers, what levers the government, businesses, big businesses, as well as smaller businesses and regulators all have to play in this journey. So my role as Chief Impact Officer is to really understand what those levers are and what impact can we have as an organisation on that journey.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, we look forward to hearing a bit more about that as we go along. Gareth, I'm going to come to you next. Tell us a little bit about your business and what you're doing in 2022 for sustainability.
Hi, Gabby. Yeah, so I'm Gareth. I'm the MD of a company called Seacourt, and we are, I think, pretty much the most sustainable printing company on the planet. So we're operating in a really resource-intensive, quite polluting industry, and we've been on a mission for the last 25 years to actually change that narrative and take what is a very poor performing environmental sector and actually show that it's possible to make significant improvements. We've now ultimately, we're actually now a carbon negative business, which having mapped our scopes 1, 2 and 3, which for those of you that aren't aware of what that means, it means that we've taken absolute responsibility for our entire impacts, both in our supply chain all the way down to forests, and also our end of life and everything in between. And so what that ultimately means is that if we can do it as a quite an intensive manufacturer, then anyone can do it. And we really are an example that anything is possible. It's just having the sense of ambition to actually push the agenda forward. We also happen to be the highest scoring B Corp printing company or media company on the planet as well.
Wow, that's quite a start. That's impressive. Well, we're lucky to have you here. I think it's really interesting to have a business that obviously doesn't come from a place of sustainability, but now does. I think it's really interesting. Laura, I'm going to come to you next.
Thank you. So I'm Laura Crawford, and I am the MD for Mama Bamboo. And ours also is a fairly unsustainable industry normally. So we manufacture nappies, disposable nappies and wet wipes for babies. But what we've done is actually look to change the way they're manufactured and change what they're made from to make them more sustainable. So we use bamboo and cornstarch and compostable films instead of all the plastics that normal nappies use. And in doing so, we've created a much more sustainable product, more sustainable to make, but also one that could fit within a circular economy. And we spend a fair amount of our time researching and testing how to actually implement industrial composting in the UK to ensure that our products can actually be, as we say, sustainable from forest to bottom and back again. And we're also one of the B Corps, and we do a lot of work with them on their circular economy models.
Brilliant. That's a very noble cause indeed, Laura. Thank you. And over to you, Holly.
Thank you. So hi, I'm Holly. I'm the co-founder and footwear designer at Trash Planet, which is a sustainable and vegan footwear brand based just outside of Bristol. So I think initially when we set out 2 years ago now, we did a lot of research into the footwear industry and the fashion industry, which, as many of you may know, is one of the most polluting industries in the world. And our kind of initial goal was to create a footwear product which didn't compromise on style and sustainability. So ever since the start of the business, we've been developing our products constantly, and our goal is to create a 100% circular sneaker, which is hopefully launching this year. We also work with a lot of factories that work with renewable energy, and we're doing everything we can at this stage to reduce our carbon impact, including only sourcing from neighbouring countries, working with as many recyclable materials as possible to reduce the impact in terms of the manufacturing processes. And our goal for the coming year is to have a thorough life cycle assessment in terms of our carbon output with our footwear, so that moving forward we can do everything possible to completely neutralize our carbon impact. And we're also going through the quite long process of becoming hopefully B Corp certified within the next year or so. So yeah, that's where we're at the moment.
Amazing. Well, it sounds like a very, very cool brand that we all need to get on our feet as soon as possible. Brilliant. Thanks, everyone, for those intros. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. It's going to be framed around the barriers as well as the solutions to moving towards net zero for businesses of smaller size. And I'd love to start, though, on a reflection from a few of you on the opportunity that's posed here. I mean, what is the power of getting it right as a business? Is there anyone that would like to start us off with their thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. It's everything as far as I'm concerned. We changed to a values-based business 25 years ago when the previous board realised just how damaging our industry was, and so it was done out of a sense of moral purpose and a sense of doing the right thing. But as we've moved through the gears over the last couple of decades, and especially in the last 3 or 4 years, where society has woken up to the fact that we are literally out-consuming our planet, and that things drastically need to change, there is a real opportunity there, as well as doing the right thing. There is a business case for doing the right thing, and for those of us that are, sort of see that front and center, people vote with their feet and spend with their hard-earned money with people that they have a feel for and the brands that they resonate with them. And so the opportunity is absolutely there to be transparent and to have a sense of leadership, and show ambition, and have a business that people want to be aligned with and believe in, not because it's legislation led, but because it's morally led, and people absolutely want to support companies that are doing the right thing. And that's where we are. We're in this decade of change. We've got 8 years to reduce our carbon impact by something like 68%. And we are so dependent on organisations like all of us, and those of you joining in as well, to actually take a lead on this. So the time is absolutely now, and there is huge economic and business advantage to showing leadership as against sort of putting your head in the sand.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more, actually. I mean, every one of our customers is making a sustainable choice, and they are voting with their wallets. They are brand loyal when they see that they're joining someone and they're buying something that they really believe in. I mean, we have a lot of customers who've now been with us throughout. Obviously, we're baby oriented, so we've had customers that have come to us with their first baby and now they're on second baby or possibly third baby. They will be incredibly loyal to those that they believe are in line with their own ethos and their own choices and their eco credentials. And certainly what we're seeing a lot is the younger generations that are coming up and are the consumers of tomorrow are more eco-aware and more sustainably led than possibly those of 20 years ago. It's almost the first question on their lips when buying something is, how is it made, and is it made in a better fashion? So yeah, it's not really a choice anymore to us, whether to make it in the old way or the new way. The new way is the only way.
Absolutely, and I can see everyone kind of nodding along to that. So I think the opportunity is clear. I'd like to move us on to barriers if I can. This isn't always easy. And the British Business Bank report found that the biggest barriers were cost and feasibility. I'd be interested to hear from you guys what your biggest barriers have been. Holly, can I start with you maybe?
Yeah, of course. I actually just wanted to add as well, just with the pointers before, that I think no matter what size your business is, whether you're kind of like us, where I guess we're just out of the startup phase, or whether you're more established, it's also like showing to everyone else like that it is possible. It's completely possible to reduce your carbon footprint no matter what size your business is. And again, I guess moving on to barriers, it is just time and I guess money. And for us as a smaller business, one of our kind of biggest barriers has actually been, I guess, not having direct contact all the time with our factory. And that has come from, I guess, like a sign of the times with COVID. When we first set out, our goal was to actually move out to Portugal, where our manufacturing is based, so we could work one-on-one with all of our suppliers and manufacturers. And obviously with COVID, we've got like a very long story about our kind of the inception, because we actually got stuck in Portugal for 4 months during lockdown. But then I guess the same thing happened when we came back as well, that it was very hard for us to get out to the factory. But I think you could see that as an opportunity as well, if businesses were looking to start up a carbon negative or carbon neutral company. It's just having like direct contact and being able to get out to the factories, make sure like all the processes are being put in place. Because for us, that's been one of the sort of the issues is not always being able to see like, well, I guess we always know what's going on, but kind of if you've got like a problem or there's something you need changing, like for example, packaging is one of the things for us as well. In terms of like reducing carbon footprint, always working with recycled packaging, and just being able to have direct contact has been really key for us.
Yeah, I presume you have to be quite hands-on when you're spearheading a completely new way of doing things, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's probably my really long-winded way of saying that you just have to be really hands-on with it and be able to, be hands-on.
Yeah. Absolutely. Laura, barriers. How about you?
So for us, sort of the hardest barriers are definitely cost. In choosing sustainable materials, fair trade practices, being part of B Corp, donating 2% of revenue to charities, it does mean that the products we produce are more expensive than what's standardly available on the shelf. And it's hard to tackle that and to get through with customers and consumers that it's not that we've just put an eco price on things. People often talk about the eco price as if it is just something we layer on top and make huge margins out of. Actually tackling that understanding that by choosing to use sustainable materials, by choosing to do sustainable business practices, there is a cost element and that does affect the price. And that's really hard. That's hard to have that conversation that says, unfortunately, making these better choices is going to cost the end consumer more money. And that, that's an added element. Lots of people want to be sustainable, but it's whether it's actually affordable. And we spend an awful lot of time working on how to making an eco-sustainable choice affordable, and making sure that we don't go all out and make the most expensive product on the market. It's absolutely perfect, but nobody can afford it. You have to sort of look at it at a more feasible viewpoint. And I think that's probably one of our biggest barriers at the moment is how to break into a very established market that is completely reliant and used to cheap plastic products being available. And that understanding that, the reason plastic has been so popular for the last 50 years is it is super cheap.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately. So what about Shanika? Is that kind of what you were seeing in the report? Does that reflect?
There's two really interesting themes there. One is feasibility and upfront costs and how they're connected in terms of being barriers. But I think we all accept that to embed circular economy practices and better sustainability and the transition to net zero, particularly now because it's early days, does take time and effort. And so the upfront cost to invest in that will feel like the most significant barrier. But I think we shouldn't forget that feasibility followed quite quickly in our research as the second thing that people saw as barriers. And I think what that means is that businesses maybe feel like they don't have the levers to be able to change things, whether that's with contracts with your landlords or with suppliers, or to actually make demands of people in your broader supply chain, or the types of relationships you have in the broader ecosystem in which you operate in whatever sector you operate in. And I think the call to action probably is, don't treat feasibility like a barrier as a starting point, see where the boundaries can be pushed there. And a bit like Holly, you were talking about the challenges with suppliers. There obviously are challenges, but I think we could probably, if we all work together as a community, try and figure out how we can take feasibility away from being a barrier and make it more the norm, that everyone accepts that there are levers that everyone will be asking about. And also just touching quickly on the opportunity. Most businesses will end up being supply chains or somehow connected to bigger businesses. I think this is where there really is an opportunity for smaller businesses and the community of smaller businesses collectively, because bigger businesses are going to be led by compliance and regulatory burden and legislation to have to change the questions they ask in their supply chain. So if we're not in the smaller business community ready for those questions, we're going to be missing out on a huge opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just chucking in on a point, a stat I read this morning, actually, is 60% of UK FTSE 100s link ESG benchmarks to executive pay. It's happening. It's here. It's absolutely real. And barriers from my perspective, and what I thought might be resonate with the rest of the guys on this call would be possibly not sure the best actions to take. Where do I start? What should I be doing, and how am I meant to be doing this and my day job at the same time? Which is a big problem with SMEs. We've all got things to do, which is how we make our companies work. And at the same time, this is seen as very much a bolt-on to how we're making our businesses tick. And I think that's kind of a really mute point there, that it shouldn't be seen as a bolt-on to business. It needs to be viewed as fundamentally a business critical function within your business, regardless of if you're just a single person business or if you're a multinational. This stuff's not going away. It's becoming more and more important as we all see this. And so the fact that we are getting more and more board representation in larger companies is only highlighting this case. And so as far as us as SMEs are concerned, it should not be seen as a bolt-on. It should not be seen as a low priority. It has to be viewed as a business critical piece of work. And therefore, making time and taking time out of your week to focus at a strategic level, what am I going to do? How am I going to make progress? Where am I? What does it look like? You need to measure so you know what your actual starting position is, and then you need to develop the strategy so that you can move things forward. And I'd just add, sorry, I'll go on, but a little bit of something is better than a whole lot of nothing. And so do not report your work thus far. Share your journey. Be open, and people will get behind you if they know that you are committed to doing the best you possibly can. Yes, it's going to take time. There is no silver bullet. This stuff, we have to work hard at it. But if you engage all your stakeholders and you share the fact that, yes, we're a business, yes, we have an impact, but yes, we are working really hard, and we have an agenda that we're working against, and that we're actually measuring our progress, people will get behind that.
Yes,
absolutely.
I would second that. I think sometimes we wait for perfection to announce anything or do anything. We're always looking for the perfect solution, but actually it's some of the tiny changes we can make along the way to each individual process or each individual product or the elements of that product that can make a big difference. And it's make those tiny changes and shout about it, but make them along the way. Don't wait for perfection, because there isn't time to wait for perfection.
Thank you both. I think that neatly brings us to kind of this discussion about the solutions. And I think, Gareth, you kind of hit the nail on the head there with the kind of barrier of, where do I start? Where does this begin? If you're sitting there as a business and this hasn't always been the driving force of the business, how do you start to do it? Gareth, is your answer to that it starts with strategy then? It needs to start at the top with looking at the entire business and working out every week where to start?
Yeah, it does. But, also you literally need to take a photograph of, where am I today? This is ground zero. This is what it looks like. Measure. We need to measure. If you're going to make any incremental gains, any improvements, you need to measure it. You need to understand where you're starting from. And, things that we all know, energy, transport, supply chain, these are all things that are easily to drill into, and to understand what sort of impacts that you're having. Changing your energy to 100% renewable energy, I can tell you it's expensive, but it's easy. It's a phone call. It's not ideal time to be doing it at the moment, but we are where we are. Looking at your transport, it's easy to do. Interestingly, we as a manufacturer, because we've done our 25 years worth of pushing the carbon impact down year on year, we've now identified, when we were looking at our wider landscape, 95% of the carbon impact of our universe, not our world as our manufacturing sites, but our universe, 95% is in our supply chains. And so we've worked so hard to make improvements that now our biggest issue is falling outside of our control. And we won't be the only ones. And so your supply chains is another great place to start, because, as Shanika said, we're all interlinked. We're not in silos. We're all part of a much larger system, and we have the ability as specifiers and purchasers of goods and services within our supply chain to do some real good. And that's what B Corp teaches us. why it's such a brilliant certification scheme is that actually you support one another, and that in itself is self-sustaining. And you want to work with people like people that share your ethos as best practice.
Okay.
I'd also add to that that yes, it does come from strategy and making those decisions and kind of pushing the culture down, but it also can come bottom up. So obviously in a small business, there may only be a few of you, but each person will very much do their own job and be their expert in their area. It really does need everybody in the company to have this as part of their thinking. In really big businesses, you'll have a department called sustainability, and there'll be a head of sustainability, and that team deal with sustainable. In small businesses, that doesn't exist. There's only maybe 5 of you, 6 of you. Each individual within the team really needs to have this as part of their thinking and their ethos, and then looking at their processes and everything that they do and offering up suggestions to how they can make a difference. So it really is, particularly in a small business, top down, but very much bottom up as well.
Indeed, very good. And I'm interested to understand, as both producers of a product that's a new way of doing things, Holly, how do you start working out what's possible? Where do you go to get advice to understand what you can actually do? Do you go straight to manufacturers? Do they give you the insight of what they can do, or does it start with someone else?
I think for us, it's always been quite a collaborative process, and we've been lucky enough to find a manufacturer that from the get-go was open to being very flexible in the way they work and kind of open to some of our crazier ideas. And again, like, I think you need to almost set an end goal and work backwards. So for us, our goal's always been a completely circular sneaker, and then we've kind of worked collaboratively with our manufacturers and suppliers in figuring out what's possible. We've definitely had to make some compromises, but I think that goes into the pointer from earlier about accepting that you're not going to get it perfect from the get-go. I think as well, like, if everyone's open and everyone's doing their little bit, it's going to become more accessible as we move forward as well. We've noticed that since launching 2 years ago compared to now, like, the amount of materials that are available to us has multiplied tenfold. And, that sort of makes the process in developing like circular styles easier for us moving forward. And again, I think definitely having some form of game plan. My business partner and I, we actually had like a game plan meeting in January, and we were like, okay, the next year, like, what do we want to achieve? Where do we want to be? And sort of like it was mentioned earlier as well, kind of scheduling some time, maybe a couple hours every day for doing research, pushing the product forward. That's been really useful to us because we're a small business. Like, at the moment, we're a 2-man team, so it is difficult balancing it because we've got to kind of run the business. We have an e-commerce business, so a lot of it's very hands-on in that area. We do all of our own customer service as well. But we've sort of started scheduling a set amount of time a week to researching, reaching out to new suppliers, chatting to the existing ones, and just seeing what we can do and what we can be doing in the future as well.
Absolutely. And Laura, how about you? Developing a new type of nappy here. How did you find out what was possible and what products you can use and how to make these happen?
Yeah, so really for us, it was about taking the standard product that was on the shelf and breaking it down to its component parts, and then researching what would be an alternative to those. And we didn't get our answers from the manufacturers of nappies because they hadn't considered doing it with different materials. It really was looking across the board at what else was available and being used for completely different purposes that could actually be repurposed and used within this single product. And then it was really about putting that together, testing it and bringing it to market as it was. And we continue to do this. So not all of our product is made of bio-based compostable materials. So we still have little side tabs on our nappies that are made of plastic. And we're constantly researching the market, looking for what else could possibly be used for this, because actually there isn't an awful lot of manufacturers sitting down really solidly thinking about an alternative to side tabs on nappies. But you do have lots of innovative companies who are looking at just bioplastics in general, different types of material, different types of inputs to plastic materials. And it will be through the likes of, we belong to the BBIA, the British Bioplastics Industry Association. It's through some of those collaborations where they're doing a lot of innovative research, working out how to use seaweed to make plastic, working out how to use corn wool to make plastic. It's through those and testing those products against our application where actually we hope we're going to come up with a perfect solution. But yeah, it's not necessarily the manufacturer that you think is going to answer your question. It can be from across the board of innovative companies.
Absolutely. Good to hear. And we talked a lot about cost as being one of the big barriers for most people. How do we navigate those costs? Do we kind of say, well, if we make this change and we spend this money, we'll get that back through increased customers? How did you all kind of navigate the cost implications?
Cost was difficult because we, like Laura touched on earlier, it's not that you're deciding to put an environmental tilt on your product or service and therefore saying I'm going to charge an extra 30% for it, and we're all sat here making huge margins. The fundamental issues is that you choose to set your business up in a way that you feel is appropriate. In our case, we decided that we had to get new technology in. We invented the technology because we had measured what our problems were in the business, and we figured out ways to get around that. And all this stuff costs money, but that's fine. But it relates to what your customer feels is value. If you produce something of value, customers will support it. If you haven't got that narrative right, and you can't quantify what it is that you're creating, which provides that value, then you're always going to struggle, regardless if it's a service or a product. For us, it took a long time to understand that, and actually for society to catch up, because I was talking to a lot of people years ago. We're the most environmental printing company around. Wouldn't it be great that we can produce your material in a way that doesn't harm the environment or does less damage? And will it cost more, Gareth? I was like, well, yeah, it probably will cost a bit more, to be honest. I don't know what you're paying, but the likelihood is it will, because we're doing this and this. But as society has moved forward now, and we are all becoming more aware, and we're talking about the millenniums, Gen Zs, Gen Alphas coming down the line, the customers of tomorrow, where it's far more important to them to understand what products are actually going to do for them. Then they're applying their own value to products, and that's aligned with brand reputation and product transparency. Can I believe in the claims that are being told? And so if this is the perennial problem, where people are looking at cost without balancing it out against value, if you're purely looking at a cost-based business model, you're never going to get to where you want to be, because you're not understanding the principle. And the principle is, are you creating value for your customers? Are you creating something that someone can fundamentally believe in, like the nappies, like the sneakers, like the printing company? The answer is yes, and that market is growing. And again, that's the whole point of this call today, is that this stuff's not going anywhere. We're not suddenly going to row backwards. The world is not suddenly going to heal itself. We're not suddenly going to reduce the carbon by 68% by people doing nothing. This is accelerating, and therefore the whole business premise, what's your right to exist? Why should you be in business? It becomes a socially and morally issue, rather than just about someone at the top making a load of money. And so all these things are interwoven, and I'm going off track now, I apologise. But I think you get the point that I'm trying to
We do, and you make a very good point. Shanika, we've had some brilliant solutions there to some of these challenges. Is that the kind of thing that you've been seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's also quite important to recognise is that different businesses in different sectors, and actually even across different regions in the across all of the UK and actually internationally as well, will need slightly different things to be able to overcome the barriers that are personal to those businesses. So I think while there are, I mean, what our research highlighted is what the themes are as general themes, but I think it's important that everyone does what John and Laura and Holly are saying, which is think about their own businesses and their own sectors. And I think the other thing that's really important is collaboration, because there's a lot that we can each learn from other sectors and those that are further ahead. And I think it's really interesting what we've heard from people who use being green as an opportunity to push business growth, because that's the opportunity that's being missed. And compliance is important, but really focusing on growth as the opportunity, and this being the opportunity to catalyze that growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that's what we're doing here today is peer-to-peer learning, asking around and understanding what other people are doing. I think that's a really, really important point. I'd love to get some very final thoughts from each of you, and that can be a piece of advice or just a message to those listening. I'll start with Gareth.
A piece of advice. The great thing is that you're on this call, and so you have an interest. Don't stop. One word for me is what sums this whole thing up. It's really simple. It's called ambition. And it's not ambition to make a stack of money. It's not ambition to have the highest turnover or the best profit ratio. Ambition is all about what do you want to create? What do you want to stand for? What is it that gets you out of bed every morning? What can you look in your son or daughter's face and tell them that you do? What is it that you're doing that makes a difference? And for me, that is ambition, and the fact that we are still learning. We've got massive targets for this year. We're carbon negative, which is kind of cool for a manufacturer, but that's only one metric. I want to create a totally regenerative business. And for anyone that's interested, there's a great new book by John Elkington called Green Swans, which talks about regenerative business and the need for a change in capitalism, which is absolutely fundamental that we need. But none of this is possible without a single thing, and that is ambition.
Lovely. Laura, over to you.
So I think my one piece of advice would be, I said it earlier, just don't seek out perfection. Seek out the small things that you can start today and keep going. So it's not about achieving this perfect aim of I'm perfectly sustainable and I have no impact on the environment, because that's actually not possible for any human being. It's about making the changes along the way and continuing on that journey and being realistic about how long that journey may take you. There's a reason that big governments talk about being carbon neutral by 2050. We know that's a long way off, but it's a realistic target. And I think it's the same for all small businesses. It's start with the low-hanging fruit, then go for the next layer of things that you can change and move along the way and build it into your company mission and values, so that it is not something you do, like you say, at the end of the day as a bit of an offset thing to do. It should be embedded in everything you do, but just, make a start. Don't wait for the perfect solution.
Absolutely. That's lovely. Holly?
Yeah, so I'd say set big goals, work backwards. Don't be afraid to ask loads of questions. I guess don't be afraid to ask the intense questions when you're working with suppliers. A lot of our learning has been knowing what questions to ask our suppliers and kind of the answers that we expect, because I think, to be honest, if you're working with suppliers who don't want to answer the questions, then you probably don't want to be working with them anyway. Don't expect perfection, but be transparent. Take people on the journey with you. Say, I'm here, but I want to be here, because people will respect that you're being transparent and they'll support you. They'll support your journey. I'd sort of say a combination of all of that.
Lovely. And Shanika, final thoughts?
It's probably a bit of a wrapper of all of that, but going back to the fact that smaller businesses amount for half of the UK's business emissions and 30% of all greenhouse gas emissions in the UK, we have to do this. And it may feel like each individual business's footprint is so small, but if we don't do it together and if we don't all do it, we won't make progress on what is, I think, society's largest challenge right now.
Fantastic. Brilliant. All right. Well, we're going to finish up now, guys. I would like to say a big thanks to everyone that's on the panel. You've all been absolutely brilliant and articulate and eloquent and inspiring. Thank you to British Business Bank for facilitating this entire conversation. And to everyone that's listening, we'll be creating lots of content off the back of today, and we'll be emailing you with the links once it's ready. So keep your eyes out for those. It'll all be very exciting, and we'll keep the momentum going. Beyond that, have a lovely afternoon, everyone, and take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks
a lot.
Bye now.